If you've been paying attention to any of the content in Genshin, you probably expect this video to be about Durin and faction buffs. It's not, and I think that makes this video especially important to make right now. Pretty soon here, you're going to be seeing a lot of clamoring about how Durin and a few other characters and systems have solved power creep. And I'll be blunt, that's mostly marketing spend to push you to pull for Durin, Klee, Albedo, and Venti. For now. Those claims aren't without merit, but they ignore the nuance of something already in game that's addressed it, and ironically enough, whose role went largely unnoticed in causing the problem in the first place. You know these damage sheets you see pop up on Twitter or in videos. Have you ever wondered how the theory crafters that make them come up with them? Don't worry, I'm not going to bog you down with math, but I will quickly walk you through the process because it's not all that complicated and it'll be an important context for the video. The truth is, those fancy images you see are generally made from a very quick and dirty form of theory crafting. The first thing they do is they look at a character's talents, figure out how many times each of these percent values happens, and then add them all together. If they're actually doing their due diligence, they break them apart into groups for whether that ability reacted, what certain stats would be at certain times, different bonuses for different abilities, etc. But this is the internet, that takes extra work, and for some reason beyond my understanding, if you ask someone to show their work, you're the bad guy. Obviously, not everyone does it this way, but that's generally what's responsible when you see a sus sheet that has Razor doing 150k DPS. The next thing they do is take whatever the base stat is for that character's ability and multiply it by that percent value. Again, there should be a level of discernment for this, but they'll generally go with the max it could be. Then they multiply it by the max damage percent, then by the max crit damage, then by 0.5 for defense, then, if your flip or I win to lose, you multiply it by 1 point whatever the combined res shred is in the team. Then you multiply it by whatever the reaction multiplier is for the amount of EM they have. Do that for the other three characters. Do it for your transformative reactions, your overload, electrocharge, hyperbloom, etc. Multiply that by the number of times you expect it to happen, add everything together, and boom, you have your damage per rotation. Divide that by however many seconds the rotation is, and you have your DPS. If you aren't agenda posting, like I mentioned, there would be a lot of extra steps to add discernment for abilities doing damage with different buffs and reactions, making sure every character has enough ER for the team, optimizing the rotation around application and catching particles, looking at lunar charge in game and seeing that unlike other transformative reactions, the damage is dynamic, so you can't just pick the highest number. But if all you want is a pretty image that says, "Oh my god, Razor power crept right in," you just add those percent values and multiply it by all the things. Now, the reason I walked us through this is because when you hear a theory crafter talking about power creep in Genshin, they're mostly referring to those percent values they're adding up. Those are called motion values, or MVs. Adding them all together gives you the total MV, and characters released in Natlan have higher total MVs than older characters. Thus, power creep. Plain and simple, right? Well, not actually. While this is power creep, it's a very narrow view of the full picture. There's kind of a major player that's been overlooked, and it didn't start in Natlan, it started in Fontaine. That's artifacts. Prior to Fontaine, it was pretty common to have build recommendations for 2-piece artifact sets. The idea being that a 4-piece set, while it may have more bonuses than the 2-piece combo, the quality of the individual artifacts in a 2-piece combo would almost always be better than the quality of the 4-piece, allowing for those substats to make up for losing the 4-piece bonus. Take Glad for instance. You get a 2-piece 18% attack and 35 damage percent on just normal attacks. If you go 2-piece Glad, 2-piece damage bonus, you're not even losing that full 20 damage percent difference on the 4-piece because that 2-piece damage percent bonus applies to all of your damage, not just the normal attacks. the extra substats you get from having better artifacts on the two-piece combo can make up for that pretty easily. That is until Fontaine. First, we get Golden Troop and Marechaussee. Golden Troop gives 70 total damage percent to skills. Prior to Fontaine, the only way to get that much damage percent from an artifact set was to have 280 energy recharge on emblem, and that meant sacrificing a lot of much more useful stats. Now, you can just get it for free. Marechaussee, well, prior to Fontaine, if you weren't cryo, you almost always needed a crit rate circlet because while in terms of stat growth, crit rate and crit damage were balanced, crit rate starts at 1/10 the value of crit damage. Overnight after Farina's release, the standard went from a 50-100 crit ratio for characters without base crit to a 60-120 ratio, and it didn't stop there. Fast forward to Natlan and we get Obsidian Codex and Scrolls, whereas Marechaussee was a 15% charge attack damage and 36% crit rate bonus. Obsidian Codex is just 15 damage percent to all damage and 40% crit rate. Not only that, but now we can make custom artifacts and would eventually even be able to re-roll artifacts. That 60-120 standard that just started half a year ago, well now if you don't have a 70-140 ratio, you aren't even trying. With Scroll, you get 6 energy refunded when a Night Soul burst is triggered. That's essentially the same as taking the cost of a burst and just subtracting the refund. Meaning, every particle becomes more valuable, to the point where building ER becomes way easier. That's just the 2-piece, and the 4-piece gives 40 damage percent for, at minimum, 2 different elements. Prior to Natlan, the support set that gave the most damage percent was Archaic Petra with 35%, that you had to pick up a crystallized shard for, and it was only for 1 element. Then we get Deep Calories, which gives 75 damage percent, and Long Night's Oath giving 100%. And this is all on individual artifacts that are likely better than the artifacts you would have been using in 4.0, because not only can we create and re-roll artifacts, but we have more sources of essence so we can level more artifacts. We get more artifacts when farming in Stygian, and the most criminally underappreciated thing is that characters now take significantly less resin to build because of the resources from doing their quest and world level 9. I never really saw anyone talk about this, so real quick let me lay that out for just bosses. Not even considering all the extra XP books we get now. Max ascending a character takes 46 boss drops. Prior to 5.0 at world level 8, you got 2.55 boss mats per run of 40 resin. That comes to roughly 18 fights for a total of 720 resin. Or if you are a 1 log in a day 160 resin user, 4.5 days of boss farming on average. Now it's 3.55 per run and you get 6 for doing the quest. So it's roughly 11 fights in total for 440 resin. Or 2.75 days with an extra 20 resin each day because they raised the resin cap to 200. So you can finally get all 180 that's generated over the course of a full day. That's 2 extra days or 360 resin of artifacts you couldn't grind before. Not even considering Stygian. This is all to say that one of the largest and most unsung contributing factors to power creep is artifact power creep. Think about it. When was the last time you saw anyone recommend a 2-piece combo? The new 4-piece sets just give too many stats and exclude older characters, making it impossible for older characters to keep up with the newer ones. That is, until Nodcry. In Nodcry, we got Silken Moon that gives 20 ER, 200 EM, and 10% lunar reaction bonus to all party members. In Sky's Unveiling, that gives 80 EM, 30 crit rate, and 10% lunar reaction bonus to all party members. Not every character can take advantage of that 20% reaction damage yet, but by equipping them, all of your teammates that can do, and that's not just Nodcry characters. And every character in the game can run these artifacts, though I wouldn't put it on your Ito. The only stipulation, and it is kind of a big one right now, is that you need 2 Nodcry characters. Unless we get a character or 2 that increases moon sign by 2, then you only need 1. They don't even have to be the ones using these sets. As I mentioned, most characters can't even take advantage of the lunar damage bonus themselves yet, but even without it, it's so much stats that characters that had fallen behind are narrowing the gap. I also need to clear up some misinformation related to that. Recently, during the whole depth fiasco, Syntonis put out a video where he said that the characters had things in their kit that make it to where the Wilderness Hunter doesn't regain health, but that's not how that works. Both it and the Lightkeeper have a grief-stricken mechanic that can be triggered by either hitting 0 HP or being hit by an ability that is enhanced by Ascending Gleam. If your team isn't in Ascending Gleam, when its HP hits 0, its HP is permanently reduced by a set amount. Then, for 10 seconds, you can reduce its max HP by some amount less than the damage you deal. After the 10 seconds is up, it heals up to its new max HP. You reduce it to 0 again, and this time it removes the original amount, plus some other amount of its max HP, at which point you have another 10 seconds. So for the Wilderness Hunter Syntonis, you would kill it once, at which point its HP is reduced by 10%. Then, for 10 seconds, every attack you deal reduces its HP by 65% of the damage you deal. When the 10 seconds is up, it heals to its new max HP. When you get it to 0 again, it loses 18% of its max HP, and again, its HP is reduced by 65% of the amount of the damage you deal to it. Every cycle, its HP is reduced by an additional 8%. So even if you're a fucking idiot and you don't attack it while it's grief stricken, you have to kill it once, then you have to do 90% of its HP, then you have to do 72%, then you have to do 46%, then you have to do 12%, at which point it's dead. So worst case scenario where you panic because you don't see a red bar for some reason, you have to kill it 5 times. But that 5 times is more like 3 times because it takes less each time. As you should have been able to see in the clip, I'm using an Effa. I still have to get it to 0 to trigger the state, and it still heals if I don't reduce its max HP to 0 in 10 seconds. It's not an Effa or Flynn's or Nefer or any individual character, it's Ascending Gleam. When Ascending Gleam is active and the characters with moon sign abilities deal it damage, it causes it to enter the state without having to reduce its HP to 0 the first time. And instead of its max HP being reduced by 65% of the damage dealt, it's reduced by 90%. You get its actual HP to 0, it loses 10% of its max HP, and it's dead. So that works out to killing it exactly once. That is way better, but it's not something tied to a specific character. And you really should never have to reduce its HP to 0 more than 3 times at maximum without Ascending Gleam. And to be clear, I don't think Syntonis was lying. I think it's the same reason why Tectone thinks Kazuha's C6 is what allows Kazuha to use 2 skills. He swiped, didn't read, saw a change, assumed the change was the result of the swipe, and didn't bother to actually check before saying it. That all said, these changes are actually kind of huge in narrowing the gap Natlan created. And I wanted to make a video before Durin comes out and we go through the same shit we did in Natlan, where characters are getting stolen valor for the work artifacts are putting in. It's kind of wild that when I got C3R1 Yoimiya in 4.3, she felt too good to use, and then instantly became useless when Arlecchino released, and is now finally playable again thanks to Sky's unveiling. Though, she's pretty neck and neck with my C0R1 Hu Tao, who is now keeping up with my C0 Jadewing Spear Arlecchino. Again, thanks to Sky's unveiling, and this isn't even their final form. Right now, we're kind of stuck with using Ineffa and Ino, or Ineffa and Lauma, or Lauma and Ino. Ino sucks, but you just get so many stats from being in Ascending Gleam, it makes her worth using. Kind of like Kachina before Shilonen released. Just imagine the possibilities once we're able to use a good character in her slot. I, for one, am looking forward to that.